Ah, ah, ah.
Hi.
Hey, Liz.
Hi, Libby. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good now. For a second, it was not letting you join, and I was like, no one came to talk to me. Everyone came to talk to you. New York Times best-selling author of
We
This
do.
American Ex-Wife.
Well, I think maybe not a lot of people know, but you are the writing team, right? Like,
I'm the support system. I'm the support system. You are the author. Um, so should we just like jump into it? Well, let's do a formal intro,
yeah,
and then we'll just get going.
yeah.
Um, Liz, well, I just sort of introduced you. Liz is the New York Times best-selling author of This American Ex-Wife.
And you are Libby Burton, my talented editor, who we've been working on this book since basically 2021.
Oh my God. That's true. Yeah, that's right. My name is Libby Burton. I'm an executive editor at Crown, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. Um, Today I'm at my home because, like a lot of editors, I work from home on Fridays. So this is my beautiful closet door, not a corporate background. But I'm really excited to talk to you today about this amazing book and also the way in which like people have been responding to it, which I think it's a crazy thing to be a writer, right? And it's a crazy thing to work on books and do something alone that's really intense and really demanding and having no idea how it's gonna, sort of impact the world and how readers are going to like come to it. So, how's your last couple of weeks been?
It's been in it's been overwhelming in both in good ways, so many good ways, but as you well know, you write the best book in the world, you can make all these plans for it and work really hard to promote it and then just never know if it's gonna work out or not. And I think there's something happening in our culture that really isn't being talked about, and this book is talking about it. So I think it came out at the right time and is the right message for so many women. And it's doing so much better than I ever expected. I think, we had kind of joked that we wanted this book to be the book that like women just like pass to
Yes,
each other and say,
yes,
you need to read this, you need to read this. And that's happening.
yes,
I have so many Instagram messages and emails where women are saying, I bought this book, then I went out and bought another one so I could
yes.
give it to my best friend because she really needs to read this too. So that is, it's great that, it's amazing to create the thing that you wished you had
Oh,
wanted. And
I know exactly. And I think I mean, that's a privilege, right? To create the thing that you wanted in the world. But also this idea that people needed this. Like, I think people needed permission. I
yes,
think people, and by people, I mean specifically women, permission to say that this choice is not only valid, but empowering and necessary. And ending a marriage is not a sign of failure in any way, but actually a triumph in so many ways.
yeah,
So,
and it's
as
nothing to apologize
exactly.
for. And when I was writing that book proposal, I was just like, I want to go balls to the
Yes.
wall, unapologetic. I will not be sorry. And it's 2024. We need to stop shaming women for choices that literally save their lives. So
Exactly. And it's a wild thing that it is this year and there's so much that we're dealing with, politically and like um, just, I don't need to say it, but the fact that to be a woman who makes a choice to live alone and to end a relationship is still kind of
it is.
radical. That's still wild to me. And it was radical when we started working on this book 3 years ago, and it is no less radical today. And that is just wild to me. But I'm happy. I'm happy this is happening. I'm happy the conversation is happening. And I'm also just like, I'm just so lucky that I got to work with you in doing this. So we'll talk about, the sort of the reaction to the book in a lot of ways. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about like making the book too, like the secret sauce. So
Yeah.
yeah, let me I knew you were going to ask me some questions about editing, but I'm going to ask you some questions about writing first, and then you ask me some questions about editing.
All right. You're
So,
you're the boss.
um, right? writing is boring, and writing is time consuming, and writing is also it's tedious in a lot of ways. So, how did you how what were you scared of, I think, most of in putting this out into the world? You've written books before, so you know what the process was like, but this one in particular, what was hard to kind of put on the page?
There were a lot of things. I think, well, I think this book writing process was different in so many ways because I actually had time to write this book.
Mm,
I actually wasn't like worried about money while writing this book. I was
mm,
fairly compensated and finally had a job where I wasn't struggling. You know, one of the things people keep asking me, they're like, "Oh, well, when women get divorced, they're poor." And I'm like, "I know." Like I know. Like
I've
you don't have to
heard,
tell me
yeah,
I had to
yeah.
beg, ask people for money to buy juice. And I wasn't in that place anymore. And it was just so radical to me
Mm,
that how freeing it can be to be fairly compensated for your work and to then have time to sit down and write it. So that was really exciting to me, but it was really terrifying because anybody who's existed as not a straight white man in this culture
mhm, mhm, mhm.
knows that you're constantly being criticized. And I've been a writer for so many years, and I've written a lot of high profile pieces of journalism. And so those like criticisms, just kind of live with me. I wish they
Mm,
did. But
yeah,
there was a lot on the page where I didn't want to be unfair, to my
yeah.
ex-husband. Spoil it ends in divorce. But like, I didn't want to be unfair because, I had freely chosen to marry this person and I wanted to be as fair as possible. I also didn't want to create a story that like that tried to speak for my children, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just about mothering and being a mother while still making space for them to have their own narratives and their own lives. And there were a lot of things that I was like really really worried about. That not all men chapter, I really struggled with it. I like worked on it one whole weekend. I went away to a little cabin in Wisconsin with my friend Anna, who features prominently in the book. And I was just like, I don't know how to sort out this problem. Like this is a tangle of a problem and I don't know how
yeah.
to sort it out. And I remember just like, having wine with her one night and talking it through and figuring it out. So there was like the untangling of so many things, right? Of the narrative of women's life and how
Yeah.
do I tell this story in a way that's honest and truthful, but still respectful of the
Yep.
other narratives that exist too.
Yeah. I mean, and it's going back to sort of the compensation piece, and like we've only talked about this briefly, but like that idea that like writing a book takes time and energy, and like you need to be compensated for it. Um, and it's a privilege to be able to do that in a lot of ways. And I think, yeah, to recognize that is no small part of this. And
Yeah,
I think, well,
everybody deserves to be fairly compensated for their labor. Unionize your workplace and raise the minimum wage. There we go. Let's
thank
do it.
you, thank you. I co-sign all of that. Also, I mean, this idea of which is you brought up a lot of times and is central to this book in so many ways, and also has become a bit of a meme for you in some ways. But like the fact that you could only get fair childcare and equal childcare after it was like legally mandated because of your divorce, which is mind-boggling and also so true. And I think anyone who is in a relationship, particularly a heterosexual relationship, with either if you're caring for a home or if you're caring for animals or you're caring for children can relate to that in certain ways. So the fact that you said it, and the fact that like you that ultimately that means that divorce can mean more time, more energy, more creativity to make the things that you want to make and to live the life that you want to live, the life that you want to live, I think is just such a hopeful message out of this. So yeah, I'm excited by that.
All right, I want to ask you a
Okay, okay.
question. First of all, people who are tuning in, hello. But you don't know, but like Libby gets to edit a lot of very exciting people. I'm the least interesting person
Not
she's
true.
edited. Tell us Who is the most famous person you got to edit, have been able to edit in your
Okay.
career?
It's I work with a lot of women. I work on a lot of memoirs, a lot of different women's experiences. Most famous person I've edited, maybe you've heard of her, Mariah Carey. I will say though, a lot of Gen Zers do not know who she is, and if they don't, you need to go out immediately and listen to I'm like, which album? I think all of them start from the beginning because she's brilliant. Uh, and I can't say too much about that except I'll just say that like she's so much funnier and smarter than people give her credit for. So
That's
yeah,
really fun.
she's
Okay.
badass. Um, but yeah, it's a cool thing to be able to work with people, like especially women who might be famous, might just be fantastic writers. Also, spoiler alert, Liz is a better writer than Mariah
Well,
Carey, but they have their separate strengths.
I'm
um,
not a very good singer, so
but no, it's really cool. My job is amazing and wild in so many ways that I get to do that. And it's different with each book. I've also worked with Stacey Abrams, who's an amazing woman and politician and writer who wrote all of her own books, which is not cannot be said for Mariah Carey, but that's very obvious because her ghostwriter, a woman named Michaela Angela Davis, gets full credit on the cover, and she deserves that because she's an amazing writer. Um, I'm working on a book with Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand. So I have a very cool job. And this is just a plug for English majors. Like, listen, be an English major. It rules. Um, it's a really cool thing to do. So, all right. Sorry, talking too much. Liz, I know you have more questions for me.
okay, talk to me. This is a question I got out a little bit like when I was doing an event, and I'm trying to remember where it was. I think it was Chicago, where somebody was asking me about like editing the book and pulling it together because, we bestsellered a feminist manifesto,
We
and that's
did.
not easy to do. And some, they were asking me, they were like, it's a page turner. It reads like a thriller. And I was like, well, that was the goal. Always for me, it was the goal to create something that was just like a pleasure to read while
Mm-hmm.
also deeply radical.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to talk to you about editing it because, you know, people don't know this, but I turned this book in like many, like tens of thousands of words over what we had agreed. And I like added in all these chapters that like were in the proposal. And some of my chapters were like 10,000 words long. Like I like went to town on this book. And I was like, everything in it, go. And you were so good at like paring it down and like pulling it through, helping me pull through the narrative threads. And I want to talk to you about like, how do you do that when you go into a book? Do you have a very specific vision, or are you kind of feeling it out? And how did you conceive of this book? Because I was thinking of it as like a very traditional 3-act structure,
Mm,
starting with divorce, going back, and then ending with the happily ever after. But how was
yeah,
that for you working through that?
I love this question. Um, I will say first, writing a book is overwriting a book, which means that like you're always going to write more than actually ends up in the book. And I think the best writers are like very comfortable with that and are also very comfortable in revising and cutting, which you are, Liz, because you're a dream writer, and that's someone who can accept edits and understand that like maybe they've written 10,000 words, maybe only 5,000 of those should stay in the book, and also not get too upset about that, because the best books have the best words in the best order. That's cliche, but it's true, and that's often a matter of paring back what is not working. So this book, it started from, I think it had three sort of disparate elements that we were able to bring together really effectively. And that is, there is this narrative of, and this sort of traditional, 3 acts of, sort of crisis, um, repair, and then sort of triumph. And there is the manifesto piece, which is like, what are the bigger ideas that we're trying to get across here? And what are the elements of culture that we're trying to analyze? And what are the tools that we're offering up to readers that they can come away with feeling empowered and seen? And also, I think there's just humor for one, and just the elements of your writing, and your ability to sort of pull on a lot of threads of culture, history, and personal life, and to sort of combine those in a way that, because I think that's a lot of the way that all of us sort of, float through the world. We are thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about our friends, we're thinking about what we watched on Netflix last night, we're thinking about what we looked at on Instagram, we're listening to music. We're also sort of carrying the weight of history, because history and culture is what sort of determines our autonomy in a lot of ways. And that sounds like a big a lot of things to put into a book. But you were able to, Liz, to sort of do that, combine that all together, and make something that, is still page turning, which is no small feat. And all I did was like point you in the direction, tell you what jokes were not as funny, and you did the rest.
Like, people don't know this, but like, I think my initial second chapter of the book was like, was very different, and we came back with these edits that were just like, hey, like, we got to rework this, we got to rethink it, we need this book to zing, this is pulling us down. And I was like, fine. And I just like deleted the whole chapter, and I was like, I'm gonna restart it. And Libby was like, well, we don't need to do that. And I was like, no, burn it to the ground, start all over. Like, I couldn't conceive it. And so yeah, there was a lot. You also cut out my money chapter.
I
know. Had really good like points about it. I was really, I mean, I can tell you now, I was like
Please.
really struggling with it. And then what I did was I vented to my friends, and then I went back and read the whole book through without the chapter, and I was like, oh damn, she was right. Like, I mean, miss it. So that was, I think, my first.
It's a process. It's a process. Also, like, think of publishing a book as like it's truly the intersection of like the markets and art. It's like you're putting art into the market. And I've been an editor long enough to sort of know certain elements of like what is going to make people appeal to a book and make them buy it. And you're an artist, like you're a writer, you're creating something that is very tender to you. But I think the best books have a real marriage of those things, and when those things are sort of moving in the same direction, and sort of understanding what people are needing as readers, and not just what you as a writer need to get out, which you are a pro in so many ways, but there's a lot of writers who just need to get a lot out, without sort of considering the audience. And once you kind of take a step back and consider the audience, I think, yeah, like that revelation you had when you're like, it works this way.
Yeah. Well,
which is
there's the difference between writing the book you want to write and then the book people read. Yep. And I think like understanding that you're in conversation with the people reading the book, and I've always been like, I don't want them to be miserable. Like, I want people to like what I write.
Which, like, bless you, because like not enough writers like realize that. You got to bring joy, or at the very least you have to move and make a reader feel something. So and you did that really effectively with this American Ex-Wife, which you can purchase at bookstores everywhere. Well, let's talk a little bit about the reaction to the book, and like, yeah, talk to me about, well, it's amazing. It went on sale and you started sort of DMing me and like passing me messages that women had sent you. Talk to me about the DMs you've gotten. Talk to me about how people have reacted to it and what you've been surprised by, maybe what you've, felt other emotions about. Yeah, talk to me about the reaction.
So I expected, because I have, this isn't my first rodeo. I've written a lot of, again, pieces of journalism, and I'm used to putting ideas out there in the world and having people immediately be like, you don't know what you're talking about, also you're ugly, or it's just like, okay, like, all right, like, cool. So I mean, I expected a lot of pushback, because I knew that because I mean, even in trying to sell this book, it was making people uncomfortable, and those were the people who wanted it. I was like, I already know this book is going to make people uncomfortable, and I already know I want to push that button. So I expected a little bit of, I think you can see it in some critical response, not all of it, but like where people just want to be like, no, actually marriage is good. How dare you? Like, it really.
I think that people are uncomfortable. People
It's,
are still uncomfortable with this concept that divorce can be a triumph,
yes.
for sure.
And
Hmm.
it's so like I knew that part was gonna happen, and I felt really prepared for it. But also, if you read the book, I have a really good therapist, so like I'm fine. But
Listen, listen. Also, like,
yeah,
fair minimum wage, unionize, also therapists,
I'll
universal
you
health
need
care coverage for therapy.
yes,
Um, yeah,
yeah. I think a
it's
lot,
important.
yeah, a lot. Well,
That's
but
a whole other live we could go into.
the whole other thing. But the thing that has been really overwhelming, I think, are the DMs and emails from women who say, I am reading your book, but I can't read it at home because it will make my husband upset. I heard a story from a woman who is a doctor, very successful. She got the book and was reading it at her place of work, the hospital where she works, and her husband like came to like drop something off, saw the book and lost his mind. And there, like I had a woman say, I'm reading this on the beach, and like so many men were like, why are you reading that book? She's like, I'm so sorry. I just took the cover off because I want
Wow.
to be left alone. And I'm like, if like men are so uncomfortable with the idea of women getting
Yep.
happy, I think that's the
Yep.
tell.
Yep.
And of
Yep.
course, like, but I understand, I'm not being judgmental. I know what it's like to be in a marriage. I read Madame Bovary in front of my husband,
Yes.
now ex.
What's the question? Did he ever read it though?
Did he read
Yeah.
Madame Bovary? No.
No. No. Neither is my
But
husband.
like, yes, right? Like, sure, if you're so uncomfortable, read
Yeah.
the book.
Yeah.
I think you'll be, those are the responses that break
It's
my heart.
really,
I've
yeah, it
been,
breaks my heart. I didn't anticipate that either. And you know what? We're gonna do a little demonstration here. Watch this. Say you purchase the book,
yeah,
and maybe there's a man in your life who might
yeah,
be uncomfortable with it. You just do this. You pull one of these. Huh,
yeah.
you can barely see the beautiful gold that is embossing this. Barely readable. Just go like
It's a,
this.
I mean,
No one knows.
did,
No one knows what you're reading.
when I first got the book, I sniffed it because it's just like, it's so beautiful. You all did such a beautiful job with it, but you can also put another book cover
Totally.
on it.
Totally. That is definitely the move. Also, audio and ebook are wonderful options. So don't feel as though
Yeah,
you are
get,
restricted in this
yeah,
way.
and I
But also,
also,
isn't that wild though that it's almost like it's not, and I don't want to make any comparisons to banned books because that's such a serious issue in America in 2024, but this idea that like a book that just is going to make men uncomfortable to the fact that they would, infringe upon a woman reading a book on the beach. Wild to me, but that's
yeah,
still the world that we live in, and that's
yeah.
that's no joke.
Strange men approaching women reading my book, being like, "Ugh,"
That means
I don't.
you're doing something right, though,
Yes.
Liz. Right?
Oh yeah. One of my things in it, and people tuning in, if you're not already following me, you should follow me on Instagram. But one of the fun things I've been doing is like creating hater reels, and so like all the
Yes.
like
Oh my
comments
God.
saying I'm turning those into reels, and I just did one today with the music. I'm just Ken. So sorry, Ryan Gosling, but
Yes.
he gets it. He would understand. And it's just been like a really fun way to say like if this little book makes you feel so uncomfortable, maybe that institution of marriage wasn't as great as you thought it was.
Exactly. I also love to troll a troll. We all need to spend more time trolling trolls. Um,
So fun.
no, it's well, so okay. So this might be a silly question, but I'm just curious what you would say, like to say to someone, a woman who's embarking upon marriage, like
Yeah.
what advice would you give a woman who is thinking about getting married, who's like, I love this man,
Yeah.
as or maybe woman, but I think a lot of what we're grappling with here is heterosexual marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah, what advice would you give a person? Because like you love someone, you want to be with them,
Yeah.
you want to build a life together theoretically, but yet we still live in a deeply sexist society. What advice do you give?
I think it's also important to realize that there's a lot in our culture that forces people into marriage,
Yes,
like
yes,
health insurance,
yes,
taxes. If you stay single, you pay more in taxes.
yep,
But there's also a lot in our culture that prevents people from getting married. So, like, if you're disabled and you're on Medicaid, you
yeah,
might
yeah,
actually lose benefits if
Yeah.
you get married. So
Yeah.
I think like it's always important when people say like, "Oh, I'm choosing to get married." Like you realize that this institution is inherently is inherently
Yep.
unequal because for
Yep.
so many years it excluded enslaved
Yes.
people, it excluded queer people,
Or people of
and now it's a
separate
yes.
races getting married even.
Yes,
Yes. Yes.
exactly. Yes. And so there's so much structural inequality. And so okay, so we're choosing to freely enter this institution that's not freely available for all people. Okay,
Yep.
let's
Yep.
do it. And there's a lot of great reasons to do it. And love is a great reason. Love is wonderful. We're not anti-love.
We're
But
not
what
anti-love.
I say is
We're
just
anti-inequality.
we're anti-inequality. And one of the things that like makes me frustrated about giving marriage advice is like it's so often women asking for it.
I know.
And then when I
And
give
who
them
needs
advice,
it? Who needs it,
it's
Liz?
the men who need it. And it's just like so much marriage advice is like structured to make women do more labor.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Mm-hmm.
love Eve Brodsky, and the Fair Play book is, I think, mandatory reading for any person getting
Yep.
married. And so is the Fair Play cards. But it's always like, who's
Yep.
buying those cards? Who's having
100%.
conversations?
100%.
And so I want to, part of me wants to be like, when people are choosing to marry a cis hetero man, I'm like, what is he doing? Like,
Yeah.
look
What work
now.
is he doing?
What
That is,
work is he
yeah.
voluntarily doing without,
Yep.
and the work of like reading books like
Yep.
this, of like, going to therapy, of like
Doing
saying,
the research to find a couples therapist and maybe interviewing them and understanding if your insurance covers it, doing
just
all of that.
like those cognitive
Mm-hmm.
labors that are so important. And so I just like, so those are things I would say just like look
Yep.
for. And I think advocate for your happiness, don't compromise on it.
Yeah.
And I think that, also understand that our culture makes equality very, very difficult. So
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
you can marry somebody and you can both be like, yeah, we're going to be equal. And then 5 years and two kids in, you realize, oh, there's no affordable healthcare. There's a pay gap.
Yep.
And, now all of our, health insurance is tied to one person's job.
Yep.
And all of a sudden I'm, the woman's doing all the domestic and childcare labor, and you're like, we didn't want to do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And
And
so
also,
I think like realizing that too is important.
totally, totally. I'm right there with you. Also, there's nothing about this is like anti-man in any way. Well, again, subject for a whole other live, but the idea that society is set up in so many ways to perpetuate misogyny and to perpetuate this gap between what we're earning, what is expected of us, and not empowering men to take charge in these realms of a relationship and a marriage. So again, we're not going to solve that here, but I think like recognizing all of those issues that still exist and then giving yourself the time and energy to find out what works best for you, and also forgiveness when relationships don't end up and not just forgiveness, but celebration when a woman is able to find herself and find what is most important to her. I think is just at core to all of this in so many ways.
There's a lot of mission fields in this. I grew up Baptist, so I'm going to get a little Baptisty, but like there's a lot of mission fields in this world, right? A lot of cultural battles we need to fight. My mission is women's liberation. And I don't think women's liberation equals man's alienation.
Totally. Yeah.
I think that when we get free, when we have a good intersectional feminism that includes all people, right? That we get free, that will make life better for everyone. And so that's my mission field. So sometimes people are like, what about the men? I'm like, there's so much in our culture that focuses on them. I want to stop apologizing for fighting for my liberation and the liberation of other women. And I think you can do that inside a marriage. And I think a good relationship, in a good relationship, your partner will say, oh my God, you're unhappy. How can we work to make you happy? And a bad relationship, you saying, I need to be happy, that will break it. And don't be afraid to break it. Don't be
afraid to break it. Exactly. I think, that's the core takeaway in this and so many things. We've already talked for like half an hour. This is wild. I'm gonna open it up and say if like anyone has questions, we could answer some questions. We could also bullshit about feminism forever. I still think it's wild that like in this year 2024, I think back to like little like 14-year-old Libby who was a feminist in a very different way, but like yet here we are, you know? So
Yeah.
like decades later, and we're still fighting these same fights, and we have to fight them on both like personal, interpersonal levels and also political
Yeah.
levels, which is like don't get me started on Roe versus Wade, but that's again
Yeah.
alive
So
for another time.
culture politically that's trying to put women and put gender back in a box.
Totally.
And that thing I tried to make clear, I think, from the outset of this book is that like I am very gender inclusive in my definition, but I do think we do need to talk about binaries because I think those are the things that trap us. So let's break binaries, let's break marriages,
let's get free.
let's get
Let's get free.
Yeah, and keep doing that.
Awesome. Well, Liz, man, this was awesome, and this was so fun to do. Yeah, I mean, I just
Yeah.
think that what we need to do is one, send a copy to Kate Middleton if she's
Yes.
not free.
Where is Kate Middleton, and does she
Uh,
like send us surely her people know someone at your publisher, at my publisher.
I know. Who also happens to be Prince Harry's publisher, but you know, it's
so
all
can get you. Well, there's a whole other bag.
there's a little issue there. So, anyways, but if I ever saw a woman who needed to get free,
Natalie Portman, I think, also needs this book. I
girl.
saw,
Yeah.
you know, so
yeah. But also, you know, I mean, I think as celebrities have been getting divorced forever, right? But like more and more in certain ways, and it's fine.
Yes.
A lot of privilege goes into that. You can hire the best divorce lawyers, yada yada. But again, it's fine, and people are thriving. As Maria Shriver told you in person on Tuesday when you were on the Today Show.
Yeah.
There's an ex-wife who is thriving. So, all right, we're going to leave it at that. Here's to all the ex-wives who are thriving.
Yes.
Go on, be amazing, and buy This American Ex-Wife. It'll set you free.
And I saw a couple comments asking for t-shirts. You are in luck. If you go to my newsletter, I have a merch store. So
yes.
I will pop the link to my merch store in the stories, and I need to do a post about it. I haven't done that because it requires taking pictures of myself, which I mostly just like to be unshowered. And
You're a writer. You're a writer.
I'm a writer.
I'm like
a little troll.
Exactly. Exactly. But there's
but
merch, which is amazing.
We do have merch. We do have a merch store, and it's linked to my newsletter, which is lyz.substack.com, but you can find it on my website, lyzlenz.com, all those places. And we do have merch, and we have mugs, and we can look great while burning it all down.
I love it. Thank you, Liz. Thank you for writing an amazing book. Congratulations. If you haven't bought it, go buy it and buy one for all your best friends.
All your best friends.
Yeah. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Bye.